US Senate leaders are working on a deal that would allow the government to keep borrowing money and avoid default. The agreement would extend America's credit line for another 4 months.
Tonight, the deal falls apart. The government financial crisis is back to square one.
The headlines have a distinct feeling of Groundhog Day. For more than 2 weeks, the US government's been partially closed because politicians can't agree on a budget deal. Now, if they can't agree on raising the borrowing limit by Thursday, the US could struggle to pay many of its bills, with knock-on effects for the global economy. There are warnings America's credit rating could be downgraded. Here in Washington, D.C., the government remains partially closed, with hundreds of thousands of employees not going to work or getting paid. As the shutdown continues, the prospect of the U.S. not being able to pay all of its bills, unless the so-called debt ceiling is raised, looms ever closer. And with all of that, the question Americans are asking is, why can't the politicians just end this?
After Democrats rejected a plan by the Republican-led House of Representatives, hours later it was altered and revived, but a vote called off.
There are a lot of opinions about what direction to go. There have been no decisions about what exactly we will do.
As the House bill faltered, lawmakers in the Senate announced they were reopening talks. The Democrat-led Senate accuses the Republicans of sticking with proposals, including alterations to President Obama's healthcare reforms, just to appease hardline conservatives.
With no plans for a vote in the House, a deal looks even further away. That's hindering efforts in the Senate, where a bipartisan agreement appears closer.
Extremist Republicans in the House of Representatives are attempting to torpedo the Senate's bipartisan progress with a bill that can't pass the Senate, and won't pass the Senate.
It was always going to be more difficult to find a compromise in the Republican-controlled House. Democratic representatives have warned any delay risks hurting the US economy even further.
This Republican sabotaging of any effort to move forward is a luxury our country cannot afford.
An aide close to President Obama tells me that he has been concerned and frustrated throughout this entire process, but White House officials still think there is time for a resolution, and they're looking at the Senate to be the source of brokering that compromise. Meantime, President Obama, in interviews with local anchors, expressed frustration about House Speaker John Boehner.
The problem that we've got is that for Speaker Boehner, for example, him negotiating with me isn't necessarily good for the extreme faction in his caucus. It weakens him. So there have been repeated situations where we have agreements, then he goes back, and it turns out that he can't control his caucus. So the challenge here is, can you deliver on agreements that are made? Are you able to come up with sensible bipartisan compromises and deliver on them? And one thing that I've shown is that if I say I'm prepared to compromise on something, I can deliver votes and we can get it done.
Now, to that end, President Obama had House Democratic leaders to the White House on Tuesday, making sure that he shores up support in his own party for whatever bill ultimately will go to the House floor. That's the expectation from the White House, is that Speaker John Boehner will have to put something on the floor that requires some Democratic votes, even though he has resisted doing something so far. Meantime, officials here at the White House are concerned as we get closer to that Thursday deadline. As one White House official told me, the thought is that Thursday is really such an issue because it's the last surefire off-ramp to make sure that the debt ceiling isn't hit. After Thursday, things become very uncertain. Now, President Obama will be meeting on Wednesday with Treasury Secretary Jack Lew. They will no doubt discuss contingency plans that are under consideration, but that the administration has been holding very close to the vest.